Welcome back to another Last Drops review here at Whiskey Uncorked. And today we're going to be doing a special bottle, one of my favorites, and one that I've been looking forward to discussing since I started the channel, the 13-year-old Springbank Green. This particular version of Springbank was bottled way back in 2015 now, so we're coming up on 9 years ago, probably about 8.5. The bottling code on this, or the bottling date, is 06/10/15, so if it's US, it's June 10th, 2015. If it's more like the UK, Europe style, pretty much anywhere other than the US, to be fair, it'll be October 6th, 2015. But still, we're coming up on almost 9 years now. And I was able to buy this off of the shelf in Chicago back in 2020. So I'm not sure if they just had it sitting on the shelf for that long. But at any rate, I was able to pick this up for $120 plus tax, so approximately $130 out the door. I just now checked scotchwhiskeyauctions.com, and it appears that the most recent sale of this particular bottle was probably a few months back, but it was at 250 pounds hammer price. So if you throw in the buyer's premium, and then the relatively pricey shipping fee to get it over here, depending on how many other bottles I bought, it would probably cost me about another $400 plus to get a second bottle of this. So since this review is meant to be short and to the point, just a few other details about this bottle. Again, I mentioned it is 13 years old. It is 46% ABV. This particular bottle is 750 milliliters, so it is probably primarily the US market. The actual bottling code looks like 15/429. Some of the laser code is starting to rub off. But yeah, this has been primarily matured. It was matured in sherry casks. I don't think there's too many other details about it other than that. I can definitely tell you that if this was entirely matured for 13 plus years in the same cask, that it was almost certainly a refill cask. You can see it is still pretty lightly colored. In fact, if you told me it was a first fill bourbon cask, just by the color, I might believe you, although it might be slightly darker than that for a 13-year-old. But I can tell you the flavors are not giving anything away either. There's some hints and clues here and there. But without further ado, let's get a review and give it a score. All right, let's get this guy into the glass. I will say that at one point, I would have told you that this was possibly my favorite Springbank that I had on my shelf. I don't know if I still hold that opinion. My selection of Springbanks has grown. Some bottles have come and gone. And I think this bottle's changed a bit over time. I think it has kind of slightly mellowed on the palate at least. But let's see how it's smelling and tasting today. On the nose. So it is Springbank. There's no concerns here about the casks covering up the Springbank quality. It is funky like Springbank. It's almost unmistakably Springbank. And Springbank, that funk can be sweaty and cheesy. It can be earthy and mushroomy. It can take on a number of different forms. This is certainly more on the earthy side with a heavy dose of minerality like mineral water. The malt character is absolutely still there. There's a creaminess. It's not really a graininess. It's more like the barley sugar, I guess. There's a sweetness, a honey, and there are some red fruits. I would go with like maybe a strawberry or maybe some tropical like pomegranate or guava, something like that. But I would definitely lean more in the red and slightly tart territory. So kind of enveloping all of that is this kind of dankness, right? It's like stepping out in the morning on a cool, heavy, foggy morning, and you can almost like feel your breath, the air coming in. It has like a texture to it. It's so like heavy and damp. And that mineral water essence really gives it. That's probably the most defining character of this, and I can say I am absolutely loving it. So this is absolutely still one of my favorite noses, even with Springbanks. For as much as I love Springbank as my favorite all-around distillery, this still does everything I love about Springbank. It still has its malt character. There's enough kind of fruity and even maybe some nuttiness from the sherry. I think you could talk about the nose for quite a while. You could continue to pick out a bunch of different things, but why don't we get into the tasting notes so we can wrap this thing up? Cheers. Again, big Springbank punch. There's a lot of honey. There's a lot of oak. There is some really nice oakiness here. At some parts, that oakiness is dry. At other parts, it's spicy. There's a ginger note. There's some black pepper note, and it's oily. And that funkiness, the peat from the Springbank. Sometimes when I drink through this, it's like kind of expected Springbanky peatiness. Other times, it's more sooty and dirty, and almost reminds me of, in terms of the peatiness, this might be the closest thing to an Islay whiskey that I've had from them. Again, it's not all the time, but I've gotten sooty dirtiness like in a Kilchoman. I've gotten, every once in a while, I'll get a slight touch of medicinal smokiness, like iodine Band-Aid, like a Lafroig. But so this is almost, I would say, probably both on the nose and especially on the palate, this is the more, possibly the most smoky Springbank that I've had. Now, if you're not familiar, like you can peat something and sometimes it comes out, a lot of times it's going to come off as smoky. But with Campbelltown peat and Springbank and some Highland distilleries, and even some Island distilleries, that peat doesn't come off nearly as kind of campfire-y smoky as Islay peated whiskeys do. That's why, like I said, this is peated, but it comes off more as like an earthy, mushroomy quality or like a sweaty, cheesy quality, depending on the barrels, and it just changes from time to time because it's Springbank, and they're not necessarily fatting their whiskeys to match a specific flavor profile. All right, let's do sip number 2. Yeah, there is saltiness there. Again, there's a pepperiness. There's a ginger quality. There is like a touch of herbalness. Again, it's light. I almost want to say this is probably, obviously it's from the sherry or possibly the wood itself, maybe some European oak. That's probably contributing some of this herbal spicy character. And it's a really nice complement to everything else that is going on. Fruit-wise, again, it's subtle. It's there. It's a little bit more of a tartness, a redness. I would go for like a dried strawberry chip, but it's light. It's kind of intermingled throughout everything, just kind of complementing all of these heavier, dirtier flavors. And that, with that saltiness, is just giving this some dimensions that I'm absolutely in love with. So both the nose and the palate they're big, they're rounded, but there's subtleties, there's delicacies, this is just a wonderful whiskey. I would have loved to have been able to get a second bottle of this, but as I mentioned, this is at minimum probably a $400 bottle to buy a second one of these, and at that point, it's not $400 good. If I saw one on the shelf for $400 out the door, I'd think about it and then very quickly turn around and leave before I did something stupid, because I do love this. I also have the 12-year-old bourbon cask, a green edition that maybe it was a year before, year after, I can't remember off the top of my head. That one was weird at first, but the last couple times I've had that has been fantastic as well. Look forward to reviewing that on the channel one day. But I can't really talk about value. To buy one of these today, value-wise, if you see it for $130, buy it every single time. Especially particularly if you love Springbank and you like really exploring their profile. $400, do not just run to the auctions and buy one. I would love to have another one, but with most bottles of Springbank these days, particularly older bottles, they just don't financially make sense to try to get one. Unless money's no option to you, or you are just the biggest Springbank fan in the world and you're willing to pay anything. Quality-wise, I would love to have another bottle of this. Price-wise, obviously, it's a Springbank bottle. It's an investment. It's an investor's item. It's collector's item, all those things. So you're going to have to pay that premium if you ever want to own a bottle of this. I got lucky. I got in just under the line where $120, yeah, no problem. I would do it every time. But in terms of a score, again, I've been doing this more recently. I think I want to give it a 9. I do, but I think if I'm trying to give it an unbiased score and just like where it sits on the total landscape, I think I've got to stick with an 8 out of 10, which is excellent. It's not quite wow. It's a Springbank lover's dram, but it doesn't hit that like holy crap moment. So I can't get into the 9s and 10s yet with it, but it is a solid 8, and it is one of my favorites. So I'm going to wrap things up and keep this one a little bit shorter, hopefully. Never quite know till I'm finished with the editing, but thank you for all for watching. Thanks for your likes, comments, your subscriptions. Please subscribe if you're liking the channel. And check out the podcast over on Spotify and Amazon and Apple. It's the Whiskey Uncorked podcast, I think, is pretty much where it's labeled everywhere now. I'm trying to get that all the same everywhere, consistent. But until next time, cheers.